The American car market is primed for a Chinese invasion. It wouldn't be the first invasion, although the word invasion is typically an exaggeration. But history has shown that when existing manufacturers ignore certain market segments, someone will come in to fill the gap, such as the European invasion during the post-World War II era. European cars were nothing new in the US at that point, of course, having been here since the beginning, with fledgling American companies having to prove themselves against the likes of Benz, Panhard, Fiat, and Rolls-Royce. But by the early 1950s, Americans were hungry for smaller cars and sports cars. Not a new concept in the US, as some would claim, but those American brands that focused on the sports car market didn't survive the Great Depression. Brands such as Stutz, Marmon, Mercer, Peerless, Auburn, and Duesenberg were all long gone by this time, and struggling European brands were anxious to get a piece of the lucrative American market, with every boutique manufacturer willing to knock out a super light roadster to get a slice of it. Although several failed, many others quickly went from obscurity to stardom, mostly from Britain. Brands such as MG, Triumph, Morgan, Jaguar, and Aston Martin. But there were others, including Porsche and Ferrari. And although there were American brands that focused on smaller cars at the time, Crosley, Bantam, Henry J., and even Nash, most of them struggled to remain profitable, opening the doors for brands such as Fiat, Renault, and Volkswagen. But ever-increasing competition, mixed with expensive regulations, made it hard to stay profitable, particularly for expensive sports cars, with the rise of cheaper and often faster American pony cars. Then came the Japanese invasion, which was more like a slow and steady growth than an invasion, with Japanese brands starting to show up in the US in the late 50s and early 60s. But their reputation at the time was the complete opposite of what it is now, typically viewed as cheap and disposable, an image early offerings did little to improve on. But they learned from these struggles and improved. Then the fuel crisis of the 1970s, and the struggling small cars from Europe, opened up a door for the Japanese brands. And by the early 1980s, cars from Japan had more than 15% market share in the US, primarily taken from European brands. But market share continued to grow, as they became some of the best-selling vehicles in the country by the mid-90s, particularly those by Toyota and Honda. While some of the Japanese brands that showed promise early on, such as Isuzu and Mitsubishi, proved far less successful in the long run, and a few never even managed to make a significant impact, such as Suzuki and Daihatsu. But those that were successful continued to increase their success, and so their prices climbed, and the tiny, cheap fuel sippers became harder to come by, providing an opportunity for Korean manufacturers, Hyundai, Kia, and Daewoo, showing up in the US market in the 80s, often with an American brand badge, but soon with models of their own. And Hyundai even advertised the Excel as the two for the price of one car, as they were some of the cheapest cars available in America at the time. Like the Japanese, early models struggled with quality issues, and have since improved with experience, although they were perhaps a bit slower for their reputation to catch up. As in the eyes of many, they still haven't. But Hyundai and Kia have settled well into the mainstream, and although Daewoo didn't do so well on its own, they continued to find US sales through GM. But perhaps more so than ever before, there are huge gaps in the American market, particularly from American brands. With the focus being on light trucks and crossover SUVs, few actual cars are being offered, particularly affordable ones, with the average vehicle price creeping very close to $50,000, creating several opportunities in both price and vehicle segments for those that are in a position to enter them. And that very well could mean the Chinese, as they are already seeing similar success in Europe to what the Japanese saw in the early 1970s, and getting closer than you might think, with Mexico being their second biggest export market. Of course, the big issue being the same one that chased the European manufacturers out in the 70s and 80s, regulations, which in many ways actually favored the imports from Japan at the time. Not something that can be claimed by the Chinese today. Or can it? But we'll come back to that. At one point, it looked like Chery was going to be the first to come here, backed by Malcolm Bricklin, a successful importer who brought us things ranging from Subaru to Yugo. But it seems Chery was not satisfied by this, and they were exploring multiple avenues at once, leading to a number of legal actions that ended up putting the whole thing on hold. This was now 20 years ago, and Chery still hasn't found their way into the U.S. market. But they have exported nearly 2 million vehicles to roughly 80 countries. Actual gas and diesel-powered cars and SUVs, although stylistically they could be easily mistaken for something else. But Chinese cars are being sold here now, just not under Chinese brands. Starting with the Buick Envision in 2016, a car built by GM's Chinese partners, the Shanghai Automotive Industry Corporation, or Shanghai Motors. As of 2024, the Lincoln Nautilus is also being built in China by Ford's partner, Changan. From an import perspective, partnerships similar to how many Japanese and Korean brands got their foothold on U.S. shores. But these partnerships have existed for a while, as U.S. brands needed them to get established in the Chinese market, now the biggest automotive market in the world. And these partnerships are part of the concern, as they are required for the American brands to do business there, but are not required for them to do business here. And this is not just an issue with American brands. Chinese company Geely has had a controlling interest in Volvo Polestar since 2010. Toyota has teamed up with Guangzhou, or GAC, while Shanghai Motors has partnered not only with GM, but the Volkswagen Group as well. And they took ownership of MG Rover back in 2007, a perhaps more marketable name than that of the parent company. Which could be why Build Your Dreams has been one of the more successful Chinese brands in Western countries. But more likely, it is because it was able to take advantage of regulations forcing the switch to electric cars, something many Japanese brands are questioning the wisdom of, still leaning more towards hybrids, which is one of the advantages many of the Chinese brands would have coming here, with many already offering fully electric vehicles. But unlike when the European, Japanese, and Korean manufacturers came here, China's home market is really part of their advantage. As stated before, China has replaced America as the world's largest car market, and their partnerships with global brands in that market has better helped them prepare for outside markets. So instead of coming to the U.S. and then adapting to the market, as happened with the previous invasions, when we do see them fully enter the market here, it is likely they will be fully prepared for it, and willing to take control of segments currently overlooked, and most likely with lower prices. This could happen at any time. As stated before, some are already here. So don't be surprised if names such as Changan, Geely, SAIC and BAIC, GAC and JAC, BYD, Chery, and NIO start appearing more often in the media, or even on the streets. But perhaps they will first show up under different names: Ford, Chevy, Volkswagen, Toyota, or even MG. Either way, it is likely we will be seeing more of them, and probably very soon. So as always, thanks for watching. Don't forget to comment below and like and subscribe.